Hi there, this is my guide to what you may need for watercolour painting. I'm Martin Stevenson and I'm a watercolour painter and teacher. First of all, this is my temporary studio that I use in the winter time. So I make sure that there's a washable cover on a nice dining room table. I use these type of boards which are MDF. They're laminated on one side with melamine and plain on the other. I always make sure that I use the non-shiny side to stick my paper on, otherwise it can lift off the melamine. I have these in various sizes to fit different paper sizes. I also, this is 8 sheet watercolour paper, and I use Bockingford rough paper, which suits the things that I like to paint. I also paint in standard sizes so that when I order frames, they're all interchangeable. So if anything doesn't sell, I just replace it with another one. So I have these mounts cut by my framer. This is one for 8 sheet and this is one for quarter sheet. And as you can see, when these fit over, it gives a nice border around the painting. I always use masking tape to tape my paper down. And just a tip here, I live in Bulgaria and I've found from experience that if there's a logo on the inside of the tape, it's always a good sign to a quality masking tape. So if it hasn't got any writing in here, I just simply wouldn't buy it. So those are my boards. This is my paper, which is Bockingford. I always buy it in packs of 25 sheets at a time, which come wrapped in polythene. I then use a board and a T-square to tear the paper rather than cutting it, which is time consuming, particularly if you've got a big class. And I always keep them wrapped in polythene. Basically, I want to ensure that the only person that's touched this paper before me or my students is the person in the factory. I don't like to buy single sheets that may have been handled by an assistant that really doesn't understand how clean it needs to be. Any residual oil on your fingers that gets on the paper will show up as a resist and you'll never get it off. So it's important to keep that clean. That's the paper and the tape and the bolts. Next, let's move on to how I mix. Let's go on to paints first. This is the range of paints that I use. I like to use paints in tubes rather than pans, simply because I need access to lots of paint very quickly. So I have, this is a homemade colour card that I've done. I don't know if I can close in on that. No, it's okay. So I make sure that I make my own colour cards, because the colour cards that come either from a website or from an art shop are never accurate, and neither are these colours that are on the tubes. They're always hopeless as well. So because I buy direct from the manufacturer, I have a full, I know you only need 3 primary colours to make every other colour, but basically I had a one chance of getting the full range, so I took that opportunity. In my box here, which is from a DIY shop, I have various pens, graphite pencils, scalpels to sharpen them with, putty rubbers, which are nice and soft. I always use a 4B pencil, and I rarely sharpen them. I like to keep the ends fairly blunt so that it doesn't cause an indentation in the paper. So this is what it comes like from the art shop, and this is what it comes like after you've used it a while. In here I've got pieces of chamois leather to mop up. I've got pieces of card for scratching out, various spoons, all sorts of stuff. So that's the paint. I also, if I'm painting outside, which I do very rarely, but when I do, I use a travel palette, which is basically this, and all I do with this is I squeeze my paints into here and then usually put them out in the sun to let them dry, and that way when you fold the box up, you can see what happens here. it leaks through the side of the palette, so it's important to keep that as clean as you can, especially if you're travelling with the clothes in the same suitcase. Under normal, so this is what I use for travelling, but when I'm working in the studio I use pots, so I use various sizes of pots, and these are just bought from a hardware store. And what I'll do is I'll squeeze the paint into the sides of the dish, and this is obviously an old one that I've been using. If I was starting this again, I would probably spray this with water to allow these paints to drip down, and then clean out the bottom with kitchen roll. And you can't get enough of this stuff. So that's those. I also have water containers, and I've got some plastic ones that I used to use for students, and what I always found was that they leave their brushes in the pots, which can damage the brushes, but in addition to that it also means that they can tip them over real easy. So I use these are just kind of domestic jugs, and I use these. And the sponge is really important, because when people usually start watercolour painting, they tend not to wash the brushes out properly. And if you have a sponge in the bottom, you can bang the brush on the bottom of the jug and make sure that the brush gets really clean right down to the stock, but it also stops your brushes from getting damaged. So I usually have 2 jugs of water. I try and keep these as clean as I can, which keeps the paintings clean, and I have 1 smaller jug to mix with my watercolour paints, and also a bigger jug for washing the brushes out, and I change those very frequently, particularly when I'm painting. I have 2 water sprayers. This one is an old mosquito spray we picked up in Thailand, and that's got a really fine spray. And then we've got your average garden sprayer, which is, it's pretty good. So those are those. That's the water. Brushes. These are my various implements that I use for painting. This is my travel kit, and as you can see, I've had to shorten these brushes because when I'm travelling long haul to Asia, for instance, I have to make sure that everything is as small and as light as possible. So this is my range of brushes. I have small and round brushes on this side, from large to small, and also various things in here. Rough old bristle brushes, which are one of my favourite things, thanks to John Lovett for painting trees, and flat brushes on this side. So that's my travel kit. And then this was homemade by my girlfriend Sarah, and it's an old for going on a table for dining on. I can't remember what they got, a placemat, and then she's just sewn some elastic on the top and bottom, and these are for all my big brushes, and there's a ruler in there as well. And the good thing about this is that even if the brushes are damp when you put them in, because it's got holes in it, it'll actually the brushes will still be allowed to dry through it. During my painting process, I never leave brushes in the water, so I would never leave a brush bristle side down, but what I would always do is have something like this standing by. And again, it's just from a hardware store, and it's just a white dish, and this cloth on the bottom is just an old cut up washing up brush, dish with a cloth in it. And when I was washing my brushes out, I would always leave them this way up so that the water drains out of them, and that way the paint doesn't fall off the handles, which can be a pain when you're doing a nice watercolour painting. So that's that. In addition to my dishes, I also have this, which is just, it's quite a deep version of a butcher's tray, and it's great for doing loads of big washes on for skies particularly. So I like to use that. This is really important as well, this and kitchen roll. When you're painting, most beginners actually end up with blooms and cauliflowers on the painting. And the reason for that is that when they wash the brush out, they then go straight into the paint, which weakens the wash, but also it means that when they lift up their brush vertically, the water from the brush falls down into the painting, and that's what causes the cauliflower. So the important thing for this is to have this cloth. As you can see, it's been well used, and you can wipe the brush on it before every single brush stroke, and that means that there's no surplus on the stock of the brush to drop into the water. So this is really important, and it's usually important just to wash this out and just leave it damp, and that way it soaks up the paint really well. So that's another little tip. I also have various collections of inks and gouache, which I use for the highlights right at the end. I have some white ink here. These Sennelier inks are really nice because they come with a dropper in, so you don't actually need to use a pen or a brush with them. You can actually just draw with the dropper. So they're really nice. That's Sennelier inks, and they come in a range of colours. This one is for my Lamy pen, which is, these are the tools that I use for other things other than painting brushes. So we've got various things in here. We've got some palette knives for scratching, some plastic tools which are a bit more gentle on the paper. We've got water brushes, a spoon, natural sea sponge, various bamboo sticks, and I actually got a guy to make me some of these when I was in Asia. I also like to use these. These are great for applying ink, and also things like cocktail sticks and a straw for blowing paint around. I also use this sometimes when I'm spraying water, and one of my favourite tools to use for foreground texture is just a normal toothbrush. You can see it's not been used for toothpaste for some time, and you just literally use it like that to flick paint. And then a few normal dip pens of various thicknesses, and I use these with my ink. Talking of ink, when I was working particularly in Asia, I found it really difficult with watercolour, say on the beach, because it's just, in hot countries it can get very hot, and the paint literally dries when it comes off the brush. So this is my travelling kit, and basically it's what they call a Lamy pen. I don't know if you can see that. It's a German pen, and it's refillable. It comes with these refills, and if you buy one of these separate, it means that you don't have to buy the cartridges. You can just use the ink, and this is the little Lamy ink which goes with this pen, which dries to a lovely green colour. Now I use this for sketching. I generally don't paint plein air because of temperature issues. I've also got a scalpel in here, some graphite, a pencil sharpener and a putty rubber. So that's literally my travelling kit, just this on its own. This is my sketchbook, and this is how I use this. This is a demonstration of a drawing that I did of the lighthouse down in Lafcarda where I teach in Greece. I'll just zoom in for that for you. There we go. So this is the sketchbook, and I use this for all my outdoor sketching. And that just about covers it. That's this collection has been built up over many years, so I wouldn't expect you to go out and buy all this gear in the art shop straight away. Another essential tool is the hairdryer. Excuse that. This is just a normal conventional hairdryer. In addition to that, I sometimes use these, which are basically just plumbing insulation, and you split it, and you can either sit your board up on it like this to give you a nice slope when you're painting, or you can actually slip this in between that if you don't want quite such a steep angle. So that's my guide to what you might need if you're going to start watercolour painting. Hope you enjoyed it. Thank you, bye. So this would be the setup when I'm actually doing a painting. So I had my board here. I'm left-handed, so the light is usually either coming from this side or from, there's a window in front which is nice so you can see how shiny the paper is, because the golden time is everything. And there's also a light to my right, which means that I'm not casting a shadow over my work. So I have my board on this to give it a nice slope, which is usually about 15 or 20 degrees. I have my water pot for washing my brushes out, a small one for my paints. This is to put my brush in once I've dipped in the paint or I've washed it out, so that the paint doesn't fall off the handle. And then this is the all-important cloth. So the procedure would be mix some paint, wet the brush, wash the brush out properly, wipe it on here, and then you can paint straight from here without weakening this mix. I would normally use a test piece of paper, just a small strip of the same paper, just to make sure that it is the right colour before I start painting on it. And I use that before I actually attempt the painting. So that's the procedure. So that's my little setup. Hope you enjoyed it. Bye.